Good evening from Sacred Space at Titania's Realm. My laptop blipped us off just as I was starting to begin the chapter on healing angels. We'd just completed the very short chapter on everyday angels, and I was forging ahead and blip went the genie in my laptop. So I'm back to start healing angels again, which is a very long chapter and probably a 2 or 3 part video anyway. It's kind of interesting that my laptop chose to chop me off, but I thought I'll forge ahead and get as much of that chapter done as we can before my laptop throws another Mickey Finn or Whirling Dervish or hickety pickety bibbity bobbity boop, and we'll carry on, but we went far into reading the introduction, so I'll just repeat that, I think. So here we go, people of Earth. The time is 7:21 p.m. on the 30th of March, and you're sitting with me, my wonderful YouTube audience and subscribers, in my sacred space here at Titania's Realm. Healing Angels. And by the way, we're reading from True Tales of Angel Encounters by Carmel Riley. It seems clear that angels have the power to heal people. Why do they sometimes help us in illness and suffering and sometimes not? It is impossible to say. The angels know things about our spiritual life that we cannot, and it is beyond our understanding why they intervene in one case and not in another. But judging by the cases included here, it is clear that they do sometimes respond in situations where they can make a big difference, and they sometimes seem to respond to prayers or requests for help. In most of the encounters in this chapter, the angels physically healed those who were ill or injured. In a few cases, the angels seemed to be present to ease an individual's passing, which is also a form of healing, actually, helping you leave this mortal coil with minimal distress and agony and drama and chaos. It's a very kind and gentle healing. Many of those who have been helped by angels in a time of suffering have their faith and attitude toward life transformed as a result. Others have a one-time encounter that lets them know that angels are there when they need them. As ever, it seems that children are close to angels' hearts. No one likes to see a child ill or suffering, and angels seem especially likely to help out when children are afflicted. But the stories here concern people of all ages, from very young to very old. No one is beyond the love of the angels, and these stories are very clear demonstrations of this fact. Kathy, 58, Texas, USA. I'm a nurse and working in a hospital. You hear a lot of stories about angels. It's hard to know if that's because a hospital is a place where people are ill and in need of help, or if it is just kind of traditional, like urban legends. But once I was in a group of about 15 nurses talking about it, and 7 of them thought they had seen an angel at some point in the hospital. That's nearly half the people there. The only time it happened to me was a long time ago, now in the 70s. I'll just pause just for a moment because my first video that I just made, well actually my second video today, is up, and I just want to put a title on it quickly while we're while I'm doing this. I'm actually quite astonished at how many people were watching my videos and I'm obviously enjoying them. There's been quite a few new subscribers, so welcome to the 7 new subscribers this week. That's been astonishing too. I appreciate you supporting me and my channel with my zany little old lady ways and my zany little stories I read to you. It's a journey, and it's a journey we're all on. Of course, you come here of your own free will, and I produce these videos of my own free will. But we're kind of enjoying our time together, whatever limited or expanded time I may have. It's in the lap of the gods, people of Earth. Right. I'll just repeat that from the beginning of that paragraph. The only time it happened to me was a long time ago now, in the 70s. There was a woman who had had a difficult birth, so she was on regular observation. The baby was fine, but he was in an incubator, so she was alone in the room. There was no husband. I can't remember if he was away or perhaps she was on her own. I went for the last check, close to the end of my shift, at about midnight. As soon as I got there, I knew something was wrong. She was lying still, and there was a lot of blood. It seemed like she was hemorrhaging. I was really scared. She was unconscious, and all the indications were bad. It seemed like she might die. I just shouted for help, not very professional, and then I remembered to press the button for help. Right away a man came into the room, not a doctor or nurse, just a young man wearing normal clothes. I asked who he was, and he said it was okay. He knew what to do. He told me to run and get help. Then he just walked over and put his palm on her forehead, very calmly. That's all. I don't know why I trusted him. He could have been anyone, indeed. I'm horrified even just hearing that, actually. But you see, your angels come in all forms and you can't afford to be fussy how they manifest at times, people of Earth. But she seemed so calm and knowing. I left him there with his hand on her forehead and ran down the corridor. I was only gone about 2 minutes because I ran into the doctor who was coming to deal with the emergency as he came out from the stairs. When we got back, the man was gone. The woman was sitting up in bed, pale but awake. There was a lot of blood on the sheets. But when the doctor examined her, the bleeding seemed to have stopped of its own accord. I kept an eye on her over the next few days, and she was fine and happy. It was hard to believe how near to death she'd been. She had a beautiful child, a very delicate, dark-haired baby, tiny because he had been born early, but with a lovely face. I actually remember the baby's face clearly, though I can't remember the mother's face so well. I never saw the man again. Donald, 41, Edinburgh, Scotland. My son David had German measles when he was little. It's usually not too serious, but he developed some kind of infection and became seriously dehydrated. The doctor came to the house 3 times. David was vomiting every time he ate or drank. He was thirsty all the time, but finding it hard to hold down even water. He had a terrible fever. He was burning to touch. He became quite strange. His eyes were very dilated, and he was seeing things. It quite scared me because he was looking at things behind me and saying odd things about the faces he could see. The doctor told us to stay with him and to keep giving him a drink every hour or so, even if we had to wake him up to do it, because the dehydration was the dangerous thing. He said that if things didn't improve overnight, we might have to take him to the hospital. I stayed up through the night because my wife was absolutely shattered. She didn't want to go to bed, but I told her she had to sleep for a few hours at least. When she finally gave in, she lay down and was sleeping like a log within a few moments. I kept waking David up and getting him to drink a little. He would mutter and grumble and then fall straight back to sleep. But all the time he was asleep, he was tossing and turning. I was reading a book to try and stay awake. I'd promised my wife that if I started falling asleep, I'd get her up, but I wanted her to sleep, so I tried to keep going. Then I suppose maybe I did fall asleep. When I woke up, there was a woman standing by the bed, holding David's hand. I was terrified. I had no idea what was happening. I tried to sit up and say something, but I couldn't move. I was completely paralysed. She glanced at me, and it was clear she knew I was awake. But she just looked back at David. I sat there staring at her for about 5 minutes with my heart thumping. Then I closed my eyes and she was gone and I could move. I jumped up and ran to David. I woke him up and gave him another drink. He drank much more than he had any of the other times, almost half a glass. He was still very hot, but this time, when he lay down, he lay still, seemed to fall into a deep sleep rather than tossing and turning. I managed to stay awake until about 8 in the morning, then got my wife up and lay down for a few hours sleep myself. I didn't say anything to her about what I'd seen. I thought she'd think I was mad. I woke up at about midday and hurried in to see how David was. The fever had gone and he could sit up and drink. He'd stopped being sick and by the evening he could even eat. He got better from there on. Alison, 47, Fife, Scotland. Not long after my parents died, I developed a skin condition. It gradually spread over my legs, arms, and chest, an itchy, flaking rash. It was very unpleasant. I was living in the house alone, and it made coping with all the still everyday stuff very difficult. All the little everyday stuff very difficult. I had to try not to scratch, as it only made it worse, but nothing stopped the itching. The doctor wasn't too clear on why it had developed. First he called it contact dermatitis and tried to narrow down the possible causes. I wore cotton clothes and bought cotton sheets. I cut down on soap and various foodstuffs and so on, but nothing helped. He decided it was either an allergy to dust, which is very hard to cope with, or psoriasis. Either way, he didn't think there was much he could do to reverse it, and he gave me an allergy cream and emollient oils to spread on it. I would have a bath and wash in this oil because soap seemed to be one of the things that made me worse. My sheets would get in a terrible state as I lay there, all oily and wriggling around, trying to get comfortable and get a bit of sleep. I was in a pretty miserable state by the time it had been going on for a few months. Then I had a dream where an angel came to see me. She was a tall woman with a very pure, honest face, and I knew she was an angel immediately. She talked to me about my parents, first of all. Then we talked about my skin. She told me that the problem came from within me. She told me to think happy thoughts of my parents. So I remembered a day when I was about 18 and we went to the seaside. Then she peeled away all the itching skin, as though it was just stuck onto my skin. It was very painful, like peeling a scab, but at the same time I knew she was peeling away all of the bad skin. Afterward I was left there, standing with new, clear skin. She told me I needed to keep thinking the happy thoughts. Indeed. It's wise advice, is it not? When I woke up, I thought about what the angel had said and done. I haven't really explained about my parents, but I had to look after them for about 10 years when they were old. My dad had Alzheimer's, and my mum was too frail to cope with him. I realised how bitter I had become about this period of my life. They had seemed to turn into quite different people when they were old. They were both very dependent, where they had always been fiercely independent before. My dad used to get very angry because he couldn't accept the deterioration in his mind, and he hated forgetting stuff. It wasn't all bad, but it was very hard for me, and it was exacerbated by the fact that my 2 elder brothers mostly just left me to it. Now I tried to put into practice what the angel had told me. I tried to think about the good times with my parents. I remembered some good things from the last few years, and also I remembered how they had looked after me when I was young. I also thought about particular happy days, birthdays when I was little, or the day they came to see me graduate from college and took me out for a meal. The more I thought about this, the more I started to put the last few bad years into perspective, and the more I felt a weight lifting from my mind. I had allowed it all to get on top of me and had got into a bad mental state without realizing that I could get away from that. The angel was absolutely right that this was the cause of my skin problem. After that, it started slowly to improve. Of course, it didn't clear up overnight like it had in the dream, but it did get much better, and within a couple of months, it was mostly gone. I still had to be a bit careful about letting certain things come into contact with my skin, and I still use the emollient cream sometimes, but the worst of it was over. I suppose a good psychiatrist might have been able to uncover the cause, but I'm not sure that the doctor ever would have been able to put me on the path to recovery. The worse my skin got, the more my mental state was deteriorating in response. It was a vicious circle in that respect. It needed an intervention from somewhere completely different to show me the way toward recovery. Excuse me. Cynthia, Louisiana, USA. My nose is so itchy and I don't know why people do it. It's a bit odd. It's been like that on and off all day. I remember that we frequently went to church in the evenings when I was a little girl. I remember this one particular evening when there was a young woman in front of us. Apparently, she had been blinded in an accident when she was a teenager. She would have been about 20, as I remember her. The doctors had said that she would never see again. As we all joined in the service, I looked over at this young woman, and she was bathed in this weird glowing light. As I looked, the outline of an angel with huge wings appeared to be enveloping her. To be honest, I felt a bit frightened and began to cry. I would only have been about 12 at the time. My mom asked me what was wrong, and I told her quietly that I had seen an angel standing above the blind woman. My mom hugged me and went over to the woman. "You have been chosen for healing," I remember Mom telling her. She told her that the next time she came to church, she would be able to see. 2 weeks later, I saw the woman walking up to the church without her white stick. I ran over her to say hello, but of course she'd never actually seen me before, so she didn't know who I was. When I told her that it was me who saw the angel, she cried and hugged me and my mom and was so thankful. I've always believed in the healing powers of angels ever since. Kathleen, 28, Manchester, England. My first child, a beautiful little girl, was born very prematurely and had to spend the first few weeks of her life in an incubator in the hospital's special care baby unit. I didn't get to see her until a couple of days after she was born, because I wasn't very strong either. But when I did, I just stood next to the incubator and cried. She looked so tiny and perfect, but I knew that she didn't stand much of a chance after being born at 22 weeks. I thought that was terribly unfair. She was lying very still, and there were intravenous drips in her arms. To keep her warm, she was lying on a little knitted blanket that looked only as big as a handkerchief. One of the nurses told me that it had been made by a midwife who used to work in the unit. I thought it was wonderful that someone would do something like that in the middle of all that technology. My little girl had something to lie on that had been made with love. For the first few days that I was able to, I sat by the incubator for as long as I could. I was only 16 and the father didn't want to be involved. So my mum and dad used to come in and sit with me whenever they could. Mostly though, it was just me and my baby, who didn't even have a name yet. The nurses were absolutely lovely, but they never went so far as to say that it would all be all right, and I was very aware of how concerned they were. There were always several of them in the ward, and they checked on my baby every 15 minutes or so to make sure that she was breathing okay and that her drips were doing whatever it was that they were supposed to do. On the third day that I spent sitting by the crib, a new nurse came to change the drips, and after she'd finished, she sat with me for a while, which was something that hadn't happened before. Her name was Anna, and after she'd introduced herself, she didn't say much else. She just sat and looked at my baby with me. Just before she left to go get on with her other work, she put her hand I've lost my spot. She put her hand on the side of the incubator near the baby's head. My little girl opened her eyes and turned her head towards Anna's hand. It was the first time I'd seen her with her eyes open, and the first time I'd seen her move, and I could hardly believe it. Anna smiled and rubbed my shoulder. I didn't think anything of it at the time, but it occurred to me later that none of the other nurses had ever done anything like that either. And then she went off to the other end of the ward and disappeared into the nurses' station. For a week after that, every afternoon, Anna came and sat with me. She always put her head onto the incubator, and my baby always turned her head and opened her eyes to look first at me and then at Anna. It seemed to me that it made her happy. 10 days after she was born, when I arrived at the incubator, my baby was strapped down to the tiny cot with little fabric ties. I nearly went mad at the duty nurse, but I shut up when she told me that it was because that tiny little mite had been dragging herself around the incubator and pulling out her drips. They'd had to have special restraints made to keep her still because they didn't have anything small enough. Feisty little one. Life force is strong in that one. Bodes well. When the duty nurse was walking away, I could hear her laugh as she told one of the other nurses that I was going to be in for a lot of trouble from that one in the future. Indeed. Anna, I want to cry because it's just, well, we all know, don't we? The power of the spirit, the little tiny warrior goddess with a powerful life force. We all know how that turns out, babies. I was born premature too. Not that premature though. I was only a month early, but still. Anna showed up a few minutes later and smiled when she saw my little girl tied down to the bed. She put her hand on the side of the incubator, and the baby stretched her tiny fingers out toward it. I think she's going to be fine, Anna said, and then she wandered off to the nurse's station again. The next day, she didn't show up, and I asked one of the other nurses if it was her day off. She said that there wasn't anybody called Anna working in the unit, but that it was understandable that I might make a mistake because of all the stress I'd been under. I went back to the incubator and realised that we had been visited by an angel who had helped my baby come back to life. She never visited again, at least not when I could see her. But I think that she sometimes was there because every so often my baby would open her eyes wide and stretch out her hand as if someone had their hand close to her head. We left the hospital after about 6 weeks. My daughter is now 12 years old, has a constitution of an ox, and is named after the angel who helped to save her life. So one sweet story my mother told me about my birth was she said she cried a lot. She didn't see me for 48 hours because she had caesarean and very bad toxemia and was very ill and had been in and out of labour for 7 days before Dr. Smith, who later became Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith also delivered my firstborn, Crystal, 20.5 years after my birth. It's a bit astonishing to have the same obstetrician that birthed you. Anyway, my mother said he was a cantankerous and sour old bastard. Well, he wasn't so much cantankerous, but he had a very dry, cutting, and a sadistic sense of humour. But anyway, my mother had cried a lot and said to him, my baby's premature, and I think she worried that I might die, It's a failure to thrive baby, actually. It's probably a miracle I didn't fucking die, but anyway, another of my many miracles, but another testament to my powerful life force and spirit. Anyway, probably was Dr. Smith she was speaking to. He said to her, I don't know what you're worried about, Mrs. Phillips. He said, I was born premature and I'm hale and hearty, 6'2". He said, you've got nothing to worry about. Well, I didn't grow to be 6'2", but I grew to be just as strong and powerful and determined of spirit as that doctor was. Without the dry sense. Oh no, I can have a bit of a dry sense of humour at times. But why I say that was, he was a bit vicious to me when I was birthing Crystal. I had to have epidural, which didn't work, and he didn't give me the epidural. That was another doctor. But anyway, that epidural failed quite miserably. Actually, only kicked in at the very end. So I writhed in agony through that whole labour, actually. And then I needed a forceps delivery because my daughter was transverse, lying sideways across my belly instead of down, head down, ass up, how babies are supposed to come into the world. She had to be turned 3 times. Each time she stubbornly resumed her position. So Dr. Smith delivered her by forceps, which is not pleasant. They're like giant tongs. Won't go into too much detail because I'm sure this gentleman watches these videos and it's a bit squeamish. But anyway, I had to have a lot of stitches because I had to cut to make room for these gigantic tongs they call forceps. And I'm a young wife and mother. I'm 20 and a half when I birthed Crystal. So, vanity's a thing with young girls and young women. So I sort of looking down, because I can't see, from the angle I'm at, looking down the length of the hospital bed. I said, Doctor, I said, what do I look like down there? Because I couldn't feel it, but there was a vague sensation of all the stitching and poking and prodding around, So I was concerned. For some odd reason, I worried that I was disfigured down there. Instead of comforting me and saying, oh, you'll be fine, many women have this happen and it's normal and nothing to worry about, the old bastard turned to me and said, you look like a fucking patchwork quilt. And then I looked at my husband, who actually was not fit to be a husband or a father, quite frankly, because he was just a fucking dull intellect psychopath and a sadist and not supportive in any real meaningful way, certainly not when I just birthed my babies. So I turned to him and I said, do I, Michael? He went, yeah, you do. Well, I burst into tears. I've just given birth to his child and I've got these 2 men, one a professional and one my husband, telling me that I look awful down there. So that's why I got very, very, very fucking distressed. Oh, I won't go there with that story. But anyway, a former lover 10 years ago was very cruel and said that I was ugly in certain parts of my anatomy. And I'm not at all ugly. I have a normal downstairs, but can't even tell that it's a patchwork quilt anymore after, how old is Crystal now? 39 years and 4 months. But just these glib off the cuff kind of jokes that men will say to a woman when she's vulnerable, not realising how fucking sadistic and damaging it can be. It took me years to recover mentally just from that comment alone, never mind the difficult birth I'd had. And there's more to that story about what happened post birth, but it's gory and it's awful. And as I say, as gentlemen probably come to my channel, and you don't need to hear all the gory details. I actually did once write them down on Facebook commentary on somebody was mentioning midwifery practices in Australia and New Zealand, and I wrote everything down exactly how it really was. And then after I wrote everything down, it was like some kind of catharsis, like the trauma just lifted off my shoulders, like it had been a weight that I'd been carrying all those years. And that was only, I think it was just before the COVID thing happened. It really only was 5-6 years ago. I just felt this weight lift off my shoulders. I realised I'd carried that trauma and pain ever since my daughter's birth. And it just got like a mantle lifted off me. And the thing that lifted off the pain off me was reading through the comment section, other women having similar, complaints about how badly they were treated and cruel things that were said to them by their partners and or medical personnel. And it's just dreadful. Your most vulnerable time in your life as a woman, giving birth, and instead of being supportive and nurturing and kind, so many women in midwifery and in childbirthing in the last 40 years, probably even longer, were abused, systemically abused by medical personnel and bad midwifery practices. And it's just horrific, people of Earth. But anyway, I just got some sense of peace that I wasn't the only one. I wasn't just the victim yet again, that there were many other women who had suffered similar atrocities. And anyway, it gave me a little bit of peace to know that I wasn't the only one, but then it gave me a sense of absolute rage at what kind of hospital, medical system have we been educating doctors into. The doctor that birthed my daughter had been my mother's obstetrician and birthed me, still making glib, nasty little comments 20 and a half years later, and no doubt still wasn't by the time he retired. It's not to say he was particularly a bad doctor, he was good at his job, but he just wounded a few of us emotionally and probably never gave it a single thought either. The elitism and the entitledness and the narcissism and thinking they're playing God with women and their babies and women's, vaginas and rights and femininity and vulnerabilities. Anyway, it is what it is, people of Earth. He didn't deliver my daughter Jasmine, actually my GP. Female GP got that privilege. Can't even remember how she got positioned herself to get that privilege of being there as the doctor when I was birthing Crystal. I think I had complained to her about how I'd been treated, and she made sure that she was there for me when Jasmine was born. Jasmine's birth was difficult too. Not as bad as Crystal's because I didn't have to have all those other interventions, but she flew out of me at the moment of crowning because I vomited, and she literally went flying across the room, and had she hit the floor would have either died or been severely disabled. So 3 women caught Jasmine. I looked up from that birth and there were 3 women. My doctor, Dr. Rodenberg, the young female medical student in her last year of studies, and the midwife. And the midwife, this actually was something out of the tarot card of the three of cups, I think. There's three women holding their hands up in the air, touching each other's hands. Literally looked like that. It was quite astonishing. Of course, I just said, what happened? Because, I had no idea what happened. I was facing the other way. And the midwife turned to me and said, don't worry, darling. I play netball. I'm good at catching wet, slippery, ball-shaped things. And my doctor took Jasmine from her and put her in a little crib to examine her, and came back and slapped the midwife across the face. I never forgot that, how she slapped her one. And I still don't know why she slapped her, because she caught my baby and saved my baby's life. But anyway, I think they were all kind of in shock how close it came to losing her in that moment. And they did put her on my belly, and Jasmine was turning bluer and turning blue. I was looking at her going blue, and I said, hey, the kid's turning blue, you've got to do something. And they whisked her back away to the treatment station, gave her oxygen, and the midwife said, oh, well, when I caught her, the cord was wrapped around her neck, and I managed to put my finger up between the cord and her throat, but she said must have not got there quickly enough, and the shock must have still caused her to not be breathing properly. So yeah, that was a very frightening birth too. Anyway, as a consequence, I didn't have any more children. My marriage was not really good, and I told my husband, after Jasmine was a surprise package anyway. I wasn't expecting to have them so close together. I was going to have them 5 years apart, pace them out, and I wanted 3 children, and I was going to have one every 5 years, but it was sort of bing, bam, boom, baby, Crystal, and then 18 months later, Jasmine. After that difficult birth, and again, he wasn't very kind or supportive or nurturing. And Jasmine screamed every night till 2 a.m. for almost 2 years, and also that was very difficult. She had very bad colic too. So it was a difficult start to life, and we were all off our head and sleep deprived and mad with it, quite frankly. I just said to him, there'll be no more children. And then 2 years after I separated from him and divorced, I was 32, I got clucky again. I was kind of hoping to have another baby, and anyway, fortunately that didn't happen. So 2 children was quite enough, and especially raising them in dire poverty after the vicious divorce, very vicious. So it was for the best. Anyway, we'll carry on with the story. But yeah, little premature babies with determination to thrive like that stays that way for the rest of their life. Maria, 35, Lisbon, Portugal. I've been to Lisbon, Portugal when we went on the Fiesta to Germany. Well, we disembarked at Rotterdam and caught a train to Germany, but we went there by ship and we came back from Southampton by ship on the L&S. But yes, Lisbon was a very beautiful city, absolutely stunning. I am a singer, and a few years ago I had a real problem with my voice. I was losing my voice very badly, and it hurt to sing full voice. I tried resting it for a few weeks and going back, but it was just as bad after a day or two. The doctors diagnosed nodules on my throat. They said it was unlikely to improve without an operation. This would have been terrible for me, as it would have been a major disruption in my work, with no guarantee that my voice would ever be back to normal. Coming from the doctors, I felt desolate. Can't believe it's boiling hot in here again. 27 degrees outside. It's a hot evening, 27 degrees though, for March, the end of March. By the gods. 8:11 p.m. Put it up instead of down, honestly. Coming from the doctors, I felt desolate. I was walking down a hill, feeling very sad and not knowing what to do. A young man coming the other way stopped me. He asked me how I was, because I looked so sad. He was about 20, with very piercing eyes. I told him what the doctors had said. He told me not to worry, put his hand on my throat, saying he wanted to feel for himself. Of course, it is a little irregular to let a strange young man start touching you in this way, but he seemed so trustworthy. His hand felt very warm on my skin, and the feeling of warmth penetrated deep inside my throat. It was a very odd feeling. Then he told me it would be all right now and walked off. He barely even said goodbye. My throat immediately felt better than it had for months. I went home and tried a few scales, and it was much better. I didn't know what he had done, but somehow it seemed to have helped. When I went back to the doctors, they said that the nodules had either gone away of their own accord, or the original diagnosis had been wrong. Either way, my throat was healed, and there was no problem with it. It has been all right ever since then. I wish I could see the young man just one more time to thank him for what he did for me. My singing means everything to me, and I don't know what I would have done if I had had to stop. Sally, Colorado, USA. When I was in my teens, I lived with my grandparents because I didn't get along all that well with my parents. My grandmother became very ill with cancer when I was about 16, and as her condition worsened, I spent a lot of time caring for her at home. She became very frail, and we had to turn one of the ground floor rooms into a bedroom for her because she could no longer climb the stairs. She was too weak to do much at all by then. In the days leading up to her death, she was lapsing in and out of consciousness, and much of what she said when conscious didn't make much sense really. I did my best to sit with her and keep her company. I didn't want her to die alone. On the day she died, the doctor had been to see her in the morning and said that she wouldn't last much longer. She wasn't really conscious, but occasionally seemed to get very agitated. I sat and held her hand, stroking it to tell her that I was there. I went to rinse out a cloth I had been wiping her forehead with, and when I came back, there was a woman standing by her bed, holding her hand. People don't believe me when I tell them, but I definitely saw her. I felt almost as if I was intruding and waited outside the room for a couple of minutes. When I looked again, the woman was gone. I went in and sat with Grandma, wiping her face with the damp cloth. She looked at me and smiled, then closed her eyes. She died about half an hour later. She still had that smile on her face. I don't know who that woman was, but I think she must have been some sort of angel sent to ease my grandma's passing. Kevin, 44, Bury, England. Presume it's pronounced Bury or Bury. I developed an addiction to internet chat rooms. I would be in our home office all hours of the day and night, having conversations, often of a sexual nature, with strangers. I was hiding it from my wife, pretending that I was working, when in fact I was in chat rooms. She would think I was overworking and bringing too much home from the office, when in fact I was just staying up late to satisfy my urges. Even though I recognised the symptoms of an addiction, it took me a while to react. I'd had something of a gambling addiction in my 20s, but this was different. The harm it was doing was not as immediately evident. Gambling cost me a lot of money and got me into debt, but this was eating away at my self-respect and damaging my marriage. One night I went to bed with my wife, but got up, pretending that there was some email I needed to send or something. I knew she would just go back to sleep. I went down and turned on the computer. I sat there and actually felt miserable because I felt so worthless. It seemed so ridiculous that my obsession was getting me into this ridiculous subterfuge. I consciously asked in my head if there was anyone who could help me. Then I had the strangest sensation. It was as though the room was filled with a strange presence. I felt a warmth and smelled a beautiful smell like rose water. I felt a very urgent certainty that there was an angel there in the room. I was filled with terrible shame at how I had been behaving. I felt that there was an angel watching me and that it was not happy with me. I actually cried. I was so overcome by the moment, and I don't cry very often. I unplugged the computer and sat there for a long time until I felt the presence start to fade. For that time I had a very clear vision of how I had been harming myself and my marriage. I finally found the resolve to do something about it. The next day I told my wife there was a problem with the computer and I pretended to take it to be repaired. In fact, I just stored it at work for a few weeks. When I brought it back home, I installed it in a different place, in the hallway, right outside the bedroom, so that it was impossible to use it in any kind of secretive way. I had a good resolve to improve my behaviour, But I knew from the ways I had overcome my gambling addiction that it is important to put obstacles in your own way so that it is not so easy to slide back into bad habits. The harder it is to slip back, the less likely you are to do so. And the longer you can go without slipping back, the more the addiction is under control. One thing that interests me about this is that although I knew for a while I was in trouble, it was only when I asked for help that help came to me. Perhaps I needed to make that mental effort to actually send out a message for help before the angel would come to me. Or perhaps it was that which alerted the angel to my state. I'm not sure. But I feel much better since I shook that addiction. Like all addictions, you have to live your life on the assumption that you are not completely healed. But I feel that the important step in moving on was made because of that angel. Bill, Yorkshire, England. My dad told me about seeing an angel when my Uncle Gavin had died. Uncle Gav had been ill with cancer for a very long time. Eventually he was in hospital for about 6 weeks, sometimes conscious but mostly out of it. I was a young boy then and I remember the visits. We all tried to make sure that someone from the family visited every day, and I would go whenever my mum went along with my dad. You could tell he was very ill. He used to be a big, loud bloke, always the life and soul of any gathering. In the hospital, he looked small and grey. According to my dad, the night Uncle Gav died, Dad had gone up to the hospital to see him. His condition had worsened, so they had put him in a private room and were going to call the family anyway. My dad said he got to the door of the room and, when he looked inside, Uncle Gav lay surrounded by a peaceful, glowing, magical light. He didn't look as grey as he had looked. His face looked happier and more at rest. My dad said he watched from the doorway for a while. Then the light faded and he went over to Gavin. My dad insists to this day that Uncle Gav looked better. He died later that night, and my dad has always been sure that he really is now at peace. He's seen it with his own eyes, he says. Lila, 55, Copenhagen, Denmark. I work in a residential home for old people. I've seen what I believe were angels on 2 separate occasions. The first time was when one of our old ladies died. She had died very peacefully in the night, and I was asked to go up and make some preparations in her room, because her son and daughter-in-law were on the way, having been called with the news. I walked into the room and saw there was a woman leaning over the bed with her hand on the dead lady's forehead. There was a very bright light in the room and a slightly unnatural feeling. I apologised and backed out of the room, thinking that the daughter-in-law must have arrived early. But as I waited outside, I saw the son and daughter-in-law arrive. I had met the son before, as he was a regular visitor. We went into the room and there was no one there. I had been there the whole time and no one had come out. The woman who was there had just disappeared. That was quite strange. The other time was different. It was with a man who had quite recently arrived. He was suffering from Alzheimer's and his children couldn't cope, so he came to us for a greater level of care. He was very difficult, as he would always be wandering off and getting confused about where he was, and he would get very angry when we tried to explain. It was upsetting to him because he had clearly been very clever and interesting in normal life and now found it hard to cope with his own decline. It's often the case. One time, I just got a sharp pain going up the side of my neck. Very painful, that's why I winced. Anyway. One time I went to one of the common rooms. I was told that he had gone outside and that I should go and check he was all right. I was expecting the usual difficulties, but when I got out there, I saw him walking across the lawns with a younger man and a woman of about his age. The younger man was talking to him. Then he took the hand of the woman and they walked along together very calmly. I followed them. They went around the side of the building, and when I caught up with him, the woman and the young man were nowhere to be seen. He was the most calm and lucid I had ever seen him. He told me that he had been walking with his wife, that she had come to see him. He told me some stories about her and about how happy they had been together. He said that the young man had brought her to see him just for an hour and that she had had to go back. He was really serene and seemed to know exactly where he was and what was happening. We talked for about 15 minutes. He was so amusing and charming. I saw him in a completely different light. I walked him back inside, and then it was time for the end of my shift, so I went to say goodbye to him. He thanked me for helping him, the first time he had done anything like that since he arrived. He died that night of a stroke. It would have been quick, which is always a blessing. I was able to check on what I had suspected. His wife had died 10 years before. My belief is that an angel brought her to see him, knowing that he would soon be passing on. Perhaps the angel was helping to prepare him and her for meeting again. I'm not sure of the exact reasons. but the effect on him was remarkable, and I felt very different about him as a result. I hope that wherever he is now, he is with her, and that they are very happy together. Jane, 19, Sydney, Australia. I fell out of a tree when I was 12. I was messing about on my own. My school had let out for the holidays a day earlier than my brothers plural. So I was out in the garden playing. My parents had gone out for the afternoon, leaving me alone. I tried climbing this big tree that my brothers always went up. I think I wanted to impress them by climbing it when they were there, but first I had to check if I could really do it. I did really well, got way up farther than I expected. But then I got stuck facing forward, and I couldn't work out how to get back. For some reason, rather than wriggle backward down this big branch, I tried to turn round and go forward. That involved letting go with one hand and trying to grab the branch with the other, but I slipped and fell. It didn't look that far down as I was falling. I was just thinking how stupid I'd been. But I hit the ground really hard on my back and on the back of my head. I was pretty much knocked out cold. I was lying on my back, and I very dimly remember looking up and everything was spinning. Then I felt someone gently pushing me. I didn't see them, but I felt it. They pushed me firmly up onto my side. So I was lying, looking at the tree. And then I did pass out completely, and I don't remember anything else after that. When my parents got back, they found me there. It was another couple of hours before I woke up. I had a bit of concussion and bad bruising, but that's all. But my mother, who's done first aid courses and knows about stuff like that, said that when they found me, the first thing she noticed, apart from being scared and angry, of course, was that I was in the recovery position. And she thought to herself how lucky I was to fall and land like that. I didn't say anything about the hands I'd felt. I felt silly enough anyway, without making it worse. Sarah, 21. It's literally boiling in here like a sauna. It's 25 degrees outside. I've turned the aircon down to 22, but I'm boiling here like I'm in a boiling bloody hot pot. It's intense, people of Earth. So I guess it's a hot flush, am I right? Well, it could be spirit, but if I start raving on again and it's spirit or a hot flush, which can make me rave too. Oh dear goddess. I mean, you have to laugh. You kind of have to laugh. Anyway, it's unusual because I had it on 23. It should have been cool, and sitting in this massive fucking heat in this corner. Whew. My skin feels cool to the touch, like a little bit clammy, but not hot. So it's menopause. You have this like internal combustion engine, you just fucking go on fire sometimes, but from the inside out, and yet you'll feel cool, you know. If anyone was to check my temperature, I'm actually cool to the touch. It's bloody annoying. I wonder why I'm getting menopause hot flushes now. Maybe I'm a bit tired and I've overdone things a bit. But anyway, how many more pages? Because I remember I said to you I might have to chop this up. Yes, there's quite a lot. So anyway, I'll read a bit longer and then I'll split it up into 2 parts, I think, because I've already made, 2 videos today, and this is the 3rd one. So I don't want to overexert myself, people are there. But anyway, there's angels in the architecture, spinning in infinity. We say, hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Sounds sinister the way I did that, doesn't it? It's not meant to be sinister, people are there. I mean, some angels are a bit fucking sinister. They're angels of wrath and vengeance and angels of death, but by and large, they're a very loving presence and nothing to fear at all. Sarah, 21, Bristol, England. I got meningitis when I was 14. One day I felt a bit feverish and so I left school early and went straight home. I didn't tell the teachers because it seemed like too much trouble and I knew they'd make me wait for my mum or something. She was at work and I had a key, so I went in and lay down on the sofa. I had to draw the curtains because the light was too strong and I drank loads of water, but then I was sick. I felt awful, but I thought it was just food poisoning or bad cold or something. I didn't want to call my mum because she didn't like being bothered at work. It was hard for her looking after me. She was a single parent and I'd learned to be as self-sufficient as I could possibly be. Decided to go to bed, so I tried to get up and walk to the stairs. I had all these stabbing pains when I stood up and I had to lie back down again. I was there on the sofa on my side and I could see the phone on the other side of the room. I thought some more about phoning my mum. I'd never felt so ill and it seemed to have gotten bad really quickly, although I still had no idea how bad it could be. I wasn't going to call, but then I heard this voice telling me, she won't mind. It was an actual voice inside my head, talking out loud. It was weird. And then I still felt like I couldn't get up. I just laid there, but I felt hands on my shoulders actually pushing at me and then holding my arm and pulling me up. I couldn't see anyone, but I definitely felt something force me up off the sofa. And then, once I was upright, even though my head was hurting terribly, I was led across to the phone. I called my mum, and she could hear right away how bad I was. She actually called an ambulance from work. She was so worried. And she ended up arriving home at the same time as they arrived and coming to the hospital with me. I was ill for weeks and took a long time after that to completely recover. But they did get me onto the pills fast enough to stop it getting any worse. Now I read these stories about people dying or losing limbs or worse to the disease, and I realise how very lucky I was. And it was only because I was helped. On my own, I might have died. I had bacterial meningitis as a child. I caught it in swimming in a hot pool in Rotorua. And I came close to dying too, actually. It was one of my near deaths, one of my many near deaths. And yeah, I survived it, but 4 other children died that day. They weren't so lucky as I was. I sat in the back of our car travelling from Rotorua back to Wellington, which is a 4-hour drive, and they screamed the whole time. My head swelled up twice its normal size, and I was kind of drifting in and out of consciousness, and I knew I was dying actually. Just lay there, the back seat, waiting to die. Don't even remember. I don't think they got me to a doctor till we came back to Wellington. They drove the whole way. Instead of stopping at, larger towns and asking for a doctor, they just drove, screaming like maniacs the entire way. I remember looking out the window of the car thinking, oh well, this is it then. This is how it ends. But I honestly don't remember. I had the whooping cough and measles when I was 4, and I think I was about 6 when that happened. I honestly don't remember even being taken. They must have taken me to a hospital in the end, but I don't even remember anything about the treatment afterwards. I just know it was a form of bacterial meningitis and that 4 other children died. That's all I was told. So, but having my head swell up the way it did, it was an awful feeling. It was like being trapped in a metal can, having your brain squished right against your skull. And I never forgot that sensation. It was a really awful sensation, but I actually think my angel must have been with me, keeping me calm through that whole process while those 2 fucking demons, Geezer and David, screamed the entire trip home. So, anyway. She continues writing, I missed a lot of school and had to take the grade over again to catch up. Mum ended up having to take time off work to help look after me. I don't think I missed much school either. So it was odd, that illness. I really did nearly die of it. I know that for a fact. But anyway, here she says, they were very good about it and kept paying her and everything. It was bad, but it could have been a whole lot worse. So there you go. She was lucky to survive it. Carla, 36, Texas, USA. I tried to kill myself a few years ago. Everything seemed hopeless, and I didn't want to have to put up with it anymore. I've always been depressed, but that was the worst it's ever been. I took all my pills. I was on antidepressants and sedatives, and I took a couple of packets of each. The instructions warn you not to take more than a certain dosage, so I assumed they would kill me. I'll try not to laugh here, because never mind. Actually, the drugs they give you these days are not as dangerous as the older ones. It's not so easy to take a fatal overdose, as I discovered. I slept a long time and had very strange dreams. Then I woke up in my bed, lying on my side. I couldn't move. My throat hurt like hell because I'd taken most of the pills without water and they had bruised my throat. I felt completely weird, unable to do anything, only half awake, but very conscious of what had happened. I was worried at that point that I had done myself some terrible damage, but not enough to die. I had these terrible visions of a life in a wheelchair or hospice, and felt as bad, if not worse, than I had the night before when I had actually taken the pills. I had a fucking forensic psych nurse friend that used to always scream at me, "You're going to end up in a vegetated state with your sleep apnea. You're going to be strapped to a bed and you're going to have amputations from not being able to move your arms and legs. You're going to be a cripple, Tanya." Oh, she really enjoyed telling me all those horrible scenarios, and I was so mentally unwell at the time that I used to buy into it and believe it. Can you believe I used to believe that shit and get myself all distressed? And that woman was toxic as fucking. She was like having a toxic shock tampon syndrome shoved up your cloaca. She was that vicious. She wasn't always bad. There were times when she could be kind, but that was one of her most vicious things. Constantly at me. "You're going to be a cardiac cripple." Oh. Anyway, well, I'm not a cardiac cripple yet. And I'm on the flaming CPAP machine, which is not necessarily producing all that great results actually, but I'm soldiering on with it. And one more thing I'm trying not to die of. I mean, you almost have to laugh. It's ridiculous, people do. But anyway, this poor woman, convinced she's going to end up in a wheelchair. It's a terrible fate, of course, if that does happen to you. I'm not making a joke of that, but it's just how people will feed on your worst fucking fears, like psychic, vampirish fucking ghouls. I hate people like that. Give somebody bloody hope and encouragement. Don't drag them down into the abyss when they're already weak and ill and vulnerable. Just saying. Anyway. She writes, "If I could have gotten up right then and ended it all properly, I would have, but I simply couldn't. I've been there, having those really dark thoughts racing through your head, but implanted by someone that was supposed to be a friend and a professional mental health nurse, by the way. For the love of all the gods!" And there's that moment when your mental health spirals where you really think, "Oh, I'm better off out of here. This is just going to be a hellscape." And then it was a hellscape too, but I survived it. I survived even that. I mean, it becomes almost comedy, but it's too early. It's too early, people of Earth. Maybe one day I'll turn it into a comedy, but I'm not ready for that yet. Anyway. My bedroom was up one story from the ground, but there was a roof outside my window, and my curtains were open. I heard a thump, and when I looked up, I saw that there was a huge white cat sitting outside on the ledge. Which was strange because the cat was just staring at me, as cats do. It had enormous green eyes. I'd never seen it before, and that was strange as well, because there were plenty of cats in the neighbourhood, so it was unusual to see a different one. It didn't look like a stray. It had beautifully clean white fur, and even though it had no collar, it looked too calm and relaxed to be feral. It sat there watching me, and I started staring back at it. It really felt strange. I felt strange anyway because of all the pills I'd taken. But staring into its eyes, I started to feel a bit calmer. I lay there for an hour or two, and the whole time the cat was staring at me. Then I fell back asleep. My Penny cat was a great healer after my suicide attempt. Whenever I took a bath, she would stand beside the bath and reach up, put both paws on the edge of the bath and stare at me as if to say, "Don't pull that shit ever again, Mama T. Don't do that to me. You stressed me out the last time you did that." She would really kind of freak the hell out. And I would say, "It's okay, Penny. Mama's not going to do that again. Didn't work, so waste of time. The angels and the gods want me here, even when sometimes I don't want to be still to this day. But only sometimes. Life's pretty good now, but every now and then I think about my Penny cat and Sophie and Socks and Beauregard and Charlie, my little menagerie of little friends who would pull me up on my bullshit sometimes, better than any human could, would remind me they needed me here and I had to stay, and they were doing their best to keep kicking me along. One by one they got ill and they died, and I'm still here without them, and I want to cry when I think about that, but I guess one day I'll get another cat or a dog or a bird, but it's just I'm not ready to yet. Just not there yet. It's too soon. She continues writing. I woke later, I'm not sure how much later. It was dark. The cat was still there watching me. I could see it in the light from the yard. I managed to turn the bedroom light on and stand up, but then I felt sick and had to run to the bathroom. I was sick, and when I came back with a glass of water, I was sweating and breathing heavily. The cat still sat there watching. Cats are phenomenal healers, spiritual healers. I've always had cats, actually. It's been very odd when Socks was the last one to go. Was it 2022 when he passed, or 2021? He was the last of the cats, and it's been odd living without a cat, actually. A very heavy spiritual protection. You always know when there's a presence in the house because cats will always pick up on it and let you know. And the dog too. And they heal you with their purring, actually. It's a certain hertz sound. Can't remember if it's 35 hertz or can't remember the hertz now, but anyway, they're wonderful friends to have, absolutely. Of all three of them, Penny was like a guardian angel to me, but in a little tiny tabby fur body. Very protective and loving she was. I even brought a casual partner home one time, and all three cats didn't like him immediately. Wouldn't let him anywhere near me. I had one sleeping on my left, and one on my right, and one further down near my feet. And that he was a younger man. He turned to me and said, "You're lucky I like cats," he said, "but your cats won't let me near you." And I went, there'll be a reason for that. So he quietly got up and left. And it was a bit odd. He wasn't malicious or nasty, that man, but he just realised my cats were protecting me and he got the hint. Maybe he had the potential to turn nasty like other lovers had done in the past. But I just went with the flow because I know if my cats don't like someone, they know better than me sometimes. So, anyway. I lay down on the floor just inside the window, looking up at the cat, and fell back asleep. This time I had an extremely vivid dream. The cat was there on the ledge, and it grew bigger and bigger. Pardon me. Then it stood up on its back feet and stretched. And it had wings. It was as tall as a man, and it was like a man, except it had a cat's face. It came inside through the window and came down to me on the ground. It spread its wings and folded them around me. I remember very clearly the feeling of its lovely feathers against my face and shoulders. I felt calm and happy, being held by this beautiful creature. I've always loved cats. When I was small, my parents bought me a kitten. Then it died. It got some disease. It seemed fine in the morning when I went to school, but when I came home, my parents sat me down and told me that it had died. I was devastated. And ever since, I've been worried about keeping a cat because it seems that they die so easily. But lots of my friends have them, and I always got on well with them. I slept a long time, and when I woke up, I felt a lot better. The cat was gone. I finally managed to look back on what had happened and wonder if I had been doing the right thing. I thought about my life and all that was good and bad about it, and felt that even though I had reached an absolute low, I should give it another try. I should try anything I could to make my life work again, rather than giving up. For the first time in a while, I saw life as being a sacred gift that you have to try and do what you can with, indeed. I've always felt that that wasn't a real cat, but an angel. I think it appeared to me as a cat because I was at a stage when I simply didn't trust people. There was no kind of person that could have come to me and elicited such a positive response as that cat did. I hear you, sister. I felt that as long as it was there watching me, I was being looked after. Once I had that dream, I finally was able to reconsider all the things that had led me to being suicidal in the first place. I still don't have a cat. When I see them, I'm always reminded of what happened, but I don't think it is something that I can do. But I've changed a lot. I have ups and downs, And there are days when I wonder what it's all about, but I've never gotten as low as that again. I realised that a lot of how I feel comes down to a basic depressive tendency that I have to put up with, but that I shouldn't make such decisions when I'm so depressed. And when I feel that bad, remembering what happened helps get me through the dark days. Right. Really want to finish the story on suicidal ideation. But, okay, I'll read this last one, and then I'll chop it up. Peter, 43, Amsterdam, Holland. Just see how much we've done already. Read quite a lot already. Yeah. Just surmising whether I should continue to the end. But just surmising, people of Earth. No, I'll chop it up. I'll just finish this one. Peter, 43, Amsterdam, Holland. I think that I met my own personal guardian angel twice when I was a young boy. The first time was when I had to have an operation when I was 8 years old. I'd had tonsillitis 4 times over the winter, and eventually the doctor decided that the only solution was for me to have my tonsils out. My parents took me to the hospital one evening and got me settled in my bed. I didn't like that because it was still light outside and much earlier than when I normally went to bed. And I wasn't ill, so I couldn't see why I had to put my pyjamas on. Then my parents had to go, and I was on my own in the ward, apart from some other sick children I didn't know, and the nurses. Everybody was very nice, but I was scared. After they put the lights out, a boy about my own age came over to my bed and asked if I was having my tonsils out. I told him that I was. He said that he'd had his done 2 days before. I asked him if it hurt, and he said that it didn't at the time because you were asleep, but that it was a bit sore afterward. Then he said that he hadn't minded his throat being sore because you got as much ice cream as you wanted. I was already feeling much better about my operation when he put his hand on my forehead. I remember that very clearly. Firstly, because it's not something that young boys do, but more importantly, because his hand was wonderfully cool and a little damp. That doesn't sound very nice when I say it, but it felt like someone had put a block of ice cream just out of the freezer onto my head, and to me it was the most calming and wonderful sensation. I must have fallen asleep, and I can't recall the next morning or the anaesthetic or anything. The next thing I remember is waking up and feeling like I'd swallowed barbed wire. What was a bit strange is that the first person I saw was the boy from the night before. He asked me if I'd had any ice cream yet, and I tried to answer, but I couldn't talk, so I just shook my head. He said he'd go and ask the nurse if I could have some. But before he went, he put out his hand again, and this time he rested it on my throat. You'd think that if a stranger did that you might panic, but I completely trusted him, and I felt that wonderful coolness flow into me again. My throat stopped hurting in an instant, and I started to drift off just as the boy went away to find the nurses. He didn't come back, but I got my ice cream. I didn't see him again until I got knocked off my bike by a car about 3 years later. The driver stopped and helped me up, but he didn't stick around and check that I was really okay. Just after he'd driven off, a boy of, again, about my own age, came up to me and picked up my bike. He said that he thought I might have broken my arm and that we should get back to my house and wait for my mum to get home from work. It was only a short walk to the house, and he pushed my bike and chatted about nothing much, while I held my arm in my other hand to try and stop it hurting. I didn't know how he knew where I lived, and I didn't know how he knew my arm was broken, and I didn't know who he was until we got back to my house. I was trying to get my key out of my pocket, but my arm was too painful to let down. He gently held it for me. That wonderful, cold, soothing sensation that I'd always remembered flowed into my arm, and it stopped hurting. I suddenly realised that he was the boy from the hospital, but before I could say anything, my mum's car pulled up and he said goodbye and ran off. It occurred to me then that he also seemed to know that my mum was due back from work, when there was no reason at all that he should have. Anyway, she took me to the hospital, and my arm, which was of course broken, got plastered. She spent the whole journey home in a fury with me because I couldn't remember the license plate number of the car that had knocked me down. I didn't mind. My arm never hurt the whole time, and I knew I had my own personal guardian angel that would show up if I needed him. It's a great feeling. And I'll end it there for this evening, people of Earth. I'm starting to feel lightheaded and tired. And yes, page 83, we're up to Nerys 56.